So I wonder if this is, Kagari? Could she have done that? Maybe. My view stopped twisting. I was staring at the broad back of a man I didn't know. I could hear the sound of many boots stamping through the mud, mingling with falling rain. The stench was terrible. The smell of sewage was so strong it hurt to breathe, and it was mixed with the awful smell of burning rubber and plastic. Where was I? What was I doing right now? Things around me had changed so much. I tried to understand the situation I was in, but my brain was having an awful time keeping up. When I stopped, a rough hand patted me on the shoulder encouragingly. I looked around to see a man my age with a strong, powerful face. It was a face I'd never seen. I didn't know him. Probably. The man was wearing the camo outfit and equipment I'd often seen the self-defense force wear on the news. He was carrying an assault rifle on his shoulder. There were 7 or 8 people around me, all dressed the same. They surrounded me in a circular formation and walked forward silently, as I kept a careful eye on the area around them. And then I realized, I was wearing the same camo uniform they were. I touched my bicep to check, but there was no muscle. It was flabby and weak. Unlike the others, I wasn't carrying any weapons. Then what was going on here? It felt like these 7 or 8 tough-looking SDF guys were all guarding me. Since when was I that important? Still confused, I dragged myself onwards. Where was I anyway? It was a long path filled with dark brown mud. The walls formed a tall silhouette to the left and right. The path was filled with garbage and concrete rubble, and sometimes we had to force our way past it. I looked up past the high walls. Despite the rain, the moon in the night sky was strangely red and a little too bright. Red sky at night sailors delight, right? It was thanks to the moon that we were able to walk down a path like this without flashlights. Sound. I heard a sound. It was the sound of water. I looked over and saw a hole open in one of the walls. Filthy water was pouring out. The water formed dozens of little rivers that blocked our path. So that was it. This was the bottom of a river that had dried up. What looked like high walls were the river dikes. I turned towards the man who had spoken to me a bit ago and yelled so that my voice could be heard over the rain. But his words cut off there. Everyone seemed more tense than ever. One of them grabbed me and pushed me toward the side of the riverbed. Everyone put their backs against the wall and held their breath. I could hear the sound of helicopters' rotors in the distance. No, more than just one. They were getting closer. I had no idea what was going on, but I could feel my heart start to beat faster. Past several meters of rubble lay an overturned car. It must have fallen into the riverbed after the water had disappeared. The entire body was bent inward, and the roof was completely crushed. I lay down in the stinking mud and slid into the shadow of the overturned car. At the same time, the SDF soldiers were issuing each other orders, as if this was something they'd planned for already. 2 of them stayed by my side, and everyone else ran back the way we'd come. They'd all climbed up crevices and outcroppings on the wall, then disappeared over the edge of the dike and out of my view. Shortly after, those were gunshots. And not just a single shot from a handgun or anything like that. This was the sound of war. I could hear the helicopters get further away, drawn by the gunfire. In this world line, was Japan at war? The Third World War. I remember Suzuha's words. I happened to look inside the crushed car. I could see the corpse of a man, a woman, and a small child hanging upside down, still attached to their seatbelts. They were all covered in dried black blood. They looked like mannequins at a bad haunted house. And then I realized, I'd been so focused on moving forward that I hadn't noticed what they were, but I'd seen similar mannequins sunk into the mud. I could see their arms, the bones and ragged muscle exposed to the air, reaching up to the skies of seeking salvation. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, probably a barf too. Those weren't mannequins. He pulled me up, My knees were shaking from shock and exhaustion. Soviet Union. So this would... Okay, so let's break this down real quick. 3 things. Either we're in the past, circa before 1992, before, you know, the Soviet Union, you know, broke apart. This is a different world line present where the Soviet Union never broke apart and is at war with whomever we are associated with. The Third World War is somehow the Soviet Union came back, and it's just the sequel. The Soviet Union Strikes Back. My mind was dulled from the terror, but it seemed like there was something off about what he just said. Yeah. A helicopter passed over the riverbed. The bright searchlight passed by for a moment, but thankfully the shadow of the dike hit us. The young SDF soldier, whose name I didn't even know, pulled me inside one of the holes in the concrete. When I looked closely, I could see that it was the entrance to a sewer. It was just big enough for a single person to pass through. Struggling against the flow of water that came up to my knees, I pressed on through the darkness. My sense of smell had already gotten numb, so I didn't have to worry about the stench of sewage. Once inside, we came to several branching paths. The SDF soldiers seemed to know which one would lead where, and they marched on without hesitation. And then we came out of the sewer and back into a riverbed, which looks exactly the same. It was dried up, just like the one we'd just been through. I didn't know if it was the same river or another one, and the 2 soldiers didn't tell me. Either way, I was glad to be finally out of the foul-smelling darkness, and I tried to take a deep breath and fill my lungs with fresh air. But halfway through, I realized that the riverbed smelled even worse than the sewer. I took an involuntary step back and then another. The sight in front of me was just that terrible. What was once a riverbed was now filled with bodies. Some of them had been burnt totally black, so it was impossible to tell how much death lay before me. And in the distance, I could see what looked like bonfires. They were burning despite the rain. The fires were consuming the mountains of flesh that once were human bodies. The SDF soldier spoke to me, and then I came back to my senses. If it weren't for these 2, I wouldn't have been able to stay sane. We ran through the riverbed, one of them in front of me, the other behind. I could hear the constant drone of the helicopters above me. Sometimes the searchlights got very close. Each time they did, I hid in the piles of bodies until they passed. I'd seen this many times before as I'd wandered through the world lines. I'd seen death. I'd seen the moments when people had died. But at the same time, I'd never experienced what happened to a dead person after they were left out for a long time. More than fear, more than sorrow, the thing that hit me first was the smell of death. The rotting stench ate away at my body, not my soul. My whole body was rejecting it. It made me feel sick. Thinking that way meant trampling on the dignity of the dead, but I couldn't help it. The Valley of Hinnom. I remember that phrase. That was what that strange attacker had said that night when they came after Dr. Luskin and Maho and me. That valley was the origin of the word Gehenna, meaning hell. It was said that flames burned there every night, scorching the heavens themselves. Those who died merciless deaths with anger or misery in their hearts were flung into the flames, their souls becoming black smoke that rained hatred down on the land. What I stared at now was Gehenna. The 2 soldiers led me to a half-collapsed subway tunnel. The lights were all off because there was no electricity, but there were 3 armored cars in camo colors with their headlights on to illuminate the way. They were four-wheel drive off-road vehicles covered in thick chunks of armor, but I didn't see any real weapons. We're still in Japan if we're going to escape to Saitama. There were a lot of things I wanted to ask, but even as we spoke, I heard what sounded like gunshots outside the tunnel. The men forced me into the backseat of one of the cars. The two soldiers who had brought me here saluted, then turned around and left the station. I felt like I was never going to see them again. The door of the armored car slammed shut with a heavy thud. The car's crew were SDF soldiers, just a little older than me. The diesel engine kicked to life and the car raced down a tunnel that had originally been designed for trains. Of course, it wasn't a pleasant ride at all, but I didn't have any choice. There was no way I could tell them I wanted to go to Akihabara. I had no way to alter the world line. I had to survive in this hellish world. And to survive, I needed to do what they said. I wonder if this is going to lead back into, like, because he gets that video in, like, in the true ending that's supposed to pump him up. So I wonder if this is going to lead to him doing that, like recording that. Shrug shoulders. My wants didn't matter at all. I wasn't even allowed to express them. I just did as they told me and ran. It was all I could do. But I had no idea that it would take an entire month. Okay, so this is 2010. I can't tell if it's like some story or what, but it basically the Soviet Union still exists. All right. No, this is actually what they're talking about. Apparently let's see, they get a defense line at Mount Fuji. They don't want to hear calls for kamikaze pilots. America's only interested in protecting Okinawa. SDF's getting sent to Siberia? There are barely any professional soldiers left in Japan. Our masters in America sent them all around the globe? What? Are we going to be split up like Germany? So I guess Germany's still split up. I mean, the Soviet Union still exists. There's a provisional government forming in Okinawa. They're all set to abandon East Japan and have America protect the West. And then I guess there's others at the bottom. The reason it took a month to get to Okinawa was that we were losing the war. Supposedly the plan had been to ferry me by plane to Okinawa once I had arrived at Iruma base, but the constant bombings had slowed us down. So they gave up on the plane, and I decided I would escape to Kyushu by ground. There was more than one attack by Soviet spies and assault teams. Some of the SDF soldiers protecting me died. But when I got to Sasebo, I was able to get on a maritime SDF escort ship and managed to escape to Okinawa. Why were they doing all this for me? No matter how many times I asked, no one would answer. Okinawa in winter was covered in thick clouds. Come to think of it, I hadn't seen a real break in the clouds for a whole month. I was thinking about that when I was loaded into a van with dark tinted windows that had come to pick me up from the port. Inside the car was not only the driver, but a middle-aged man sitting in the front passenger seat. It was very short, perhaps only around 150 centimeters tall. But he had the air of a military veteran, even though he was fully dressed. I could tell he was extremely muscular.
私は防衛省中央情報保全隊の下山という